All right. All right. Well, obviously, the bell is our cue to start. So let's get into it. And we are getting into our final chapter of Micah. Micah chapter 7. Micah chapter 7. How loud am I? I sound loud. Yeah. Yeah, let me handle that real quick. But to kind of recap where we've been while I turn myself down, we wrapped up Micah 6 last week, kind of touched on the start of Micah 7. How am I now? Better? All right. Micah 6 ends on this picture of desolation, where, judgment has come, judgment has passed. And with that, it's a pretty bleak picture, right? And we're going to kind of get not a retelling of chapter 1, but a similar moment, where we're going to get to see Micah for a minute, where we're get his perspective on things for a moment. So that's where we're picking up in chapter 1, or not chapter 7, man. So we're bringing the focus back on Micah for just a moment here. So I will read this verse, Micah 7, verse 1. How sad for me, for I am like one who, when the summer fruit has been gathered after the gleaning of the grape harvest, finds no grape cluster to eat, no early fig which I crave. So, this chapter opens up by telling us just how Micah feels. When he's seen this, sees the people, what he sees, how he feels about it. He's alone. It's like a field that should be ready for harvest, but nothing's there. He's alone. He's by himself. That's how he feels. This is a pretty bleak picture. It's sad. I mean, this is supposed to be the people of God that God redeemed out of the Exodus, brought them out to be his people, a people to bless the whole world, a nation of righteousness. And Micah stands alone after seeing them in judgment. And, we're going to get some reasons why. So can I get somebody to read verses 2 through 6? 2 through 6. So, verse 2 shows us what Micah does see, what he's looking at when he sees the people. No one faithful, but rather a people ready to tear each other to pieces. This has been the issue the whole time. The people have been at odds with each other even, right? A big, huge piece of this book is how they have treated each other. Justice and injustice towards one another. And Micah puts it pretty clear here. They're hunting each other. I mean, they're actively going at each other. And, verses 3 through 6 just continue to this description of how he sees the people as unjust. And this is what's led to their judgment, right? They take bribes. They're like briars. They're worse than a hedge of thorns. I've been clearing property all week and last week. I've been stabbed several times by thorns. It is not fun. I don't know about you. I would not want to be described that way. And, each and every group is in this negative fashion, right? Each group of people he talks about, it's just bad. But I think there's something here, too, to note. there's a relational move. What I mean is like the relationships here, there's a pattern, I think, a little bit. See, it starts kind of at the top, right? Those distant leaders, those people who aren't necessarily the closest to you, right? Your everyday life. But as you get to these verses, you notice how where it ends there? Don't rely on a friend, the woman who lies in your arms, surely a son, his father a fool, a daughter, a mother, daughter-in-law, a mother-in-law. Man's enemies are the men of his own household. It's moving closer and closer to home, right? It's not just the people can't trust those leaders and the priests and these supposed prophets they have. They can't trust the people in their own houses. I mean, guys, it's one thing for the enemy to be on the outside, right? You can see him out there. He's easy to see out there. It's another thing when he's in the doors. It's another thing when it's in your midst. And that's what Micah sees. These people are among each other, and even in their own homes are at odds. And, I mean, the family unit, right? Like that foundational thing that kind of makes society work in a lot of ways, Micah sees as being broken up and destroyed. When you can't rely on the people closest to you, those by blood, your quote-unquote biological family, what can you truly trust on at that point? And this is what Micah sees. So before we kind of hop into verse 7, the conclusion of this chunk, any thoughts on the opening 6 verses? Scared. Mm-hmm.
We respond and we act the very same way that they were acting. I think it was starting in 21, Matthew 10, 21, says, brother will betray brother to death, and father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to put people to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but is the one who endures to the end will be saved. And then in verse 35 to 36 says, for I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. That's Christ is quoting Micah 7 verse 6 there. He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Initially in verse 21, he's saying this is how these people are going to act.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to act that way because some will accept, a few will accept what Christ says, the majority won't, and those who don't are going to be very much opposed to those that do.
Yeah, you're right. Christ does take this language here and iterate it in his own context, in his own ways. And especially with thinking of the context that Christ lives, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Christ is a product of first century Judaism. I mean, he's born into, well, a first century Jewish body, raised in a first century Jewish home, went to first century Jewish synagogue, went to the temple of the first century. So it makes sense, especially in a gospel like Matthew's, where he's teaching and preaching a lot to Jewish audiences. In the moments we see, he's going to borrow language like this. So yeah, it is a good reference to see how Christ uses the same language of Micah here in his own preaching and teaching. Any other thoughts, comments, observations, anything like that? Well, this chapter opens up pretty bleak. I think verse 7 brings us to a much better point. Because we're looking at Micah here, the man, the prophet who's had to look at the people around him and go, no one is faithful. I mean, he describes them all as kind of a bunch of thorns. And this is what he says in verse 7. But I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. I mean, this shows Micah's hope through these circumstances. I mean, think about it. If you take everything Micah just said, it's all reasons to quit. It's all reasons he should just give up. I mean, guys, he can't even trust the people in his own house. If there's not a situation where it seems futile to do anything, that would be it. But yet Micah turns and says, I will look to the Lord. He's making an active choice here. That despite the circumstance, despite what he sees, he knows what will come. So, I think he's expressing, I kind of think, three ideas here that we should probably hop into just a little bit. For dealing with circumstances like this, right? First things first, I mean, I think this is a moment of just setting their priorities straight. I think he's just making an active commitment here. Despite what I see, despite who I see, despite what's going on, what will be said, done, X, Y, Z to me by these unfaithful people, I will look to God. I mean, he sets his eyes on God. Much like Christ's language in the Sermon on the Mount, which your eye beholds, you will, trying to think of the exact wording, but I, the beholder, light, full of light, look to darkness, body full of darkness. That language there from Matthew 6. I think this is somewhat similar. He's going to look to what is actually true here, light, God. He's going to set that priority straight. And he's making this active decision. Second, he chooses to be patient, right? He says, I will wait for the God of my salvation. He understands this may not happen as quick as he wants it to happen because he's not working on his plan. It's not Micah's job to even truly fix all of this. Micah's just to participate in that work. But Micah realizes it's going to happen as God wants it done. And if he has to wait, he'll wait. If it's going to happen then, it's going to happen then. But Micah makes the choice. God, you do it in your time, on your plan. I'm just here to help in any way that I can. He just understands it may take time. And finally, he makes this choice to cry out to God, right? To stay in communication with him. I think this is very much a prayer type moment. I mean, it's not that he's just saying, hey, God, I look to you. You are my priority. I'm willing to wait, and that's it. No, he's going to make this an active thing in his life. He's going to cry out. He's going to communicate with the Lord. Like, he actively chooses that too. It's a continual recognition of who God is. And that's a big thing, especially when we get to the end of chapter 7. This whole chapter sets you up with all these horrible things at the beginning, ultimately to have you start looking towards the one who's beyond all of it, greater than all of it, the exact opposite of everything you see in these people, God. He's continually going to recognize, talk to, work with, wait on the Lord. That is what Micah is choosing to do here in verse 7. And this is what we're going to start to see throughout the rest of this chapter. We are looking to God and who he is, and what he is going to be doing, and what he will do with Israel, Judah, and ultimately pictures of Jesus. So, any thoughts on verse 7? Scared.
It's very similar to what Habakkuk does in Habakkuk chapter 2. Habakkuk is seeking the evil of the Jewish nation, of Judah, and asks God basically, are you willing to do anything about all this sin? God answers him, says, yes, I am, and I'm raising up a nation. And you won't believe what's getting ready to take place. And when Habakkuk realizes that
And I think you bring up an interesting thought here by especially bringing another prophet of the Old Testament like Habakkuk into this. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but the prophets don't leave these enchanted lives full of wonder and awe. Actually, they're quite ugly, bloody, messy, dirty lives. I mean, like when you get John the Baptist eating milk, locust, and all that, that's just a prophet picture because that's what you see them as. Yet they choose to wait. It's a consistent thing. There are all these people in waiting on something greater to come. I mean, if that's not what Micah's doing, I don't know what he is doing. And yet it's this consistent picture. But when you get to Jesus, it's not waiting anymore, it's action. We are making a march. Christ is doing something. Because all of this buildup, all of these things are building to him. It's this messianic expectation. We've talked about it, touches here and there as we've gone through prophets and things, but all of them are building, they're waiting on this hope. And, well, chapter 7 was going to touch on some of those promises and things as well, because they are all waiting on the guy, the thing, the person to set things right. It's coming. He's good. Yeah.
As to this salvation, the prophets who prophesied of the grace that would come to you made careful searches in hearts, seeking to know what persons for time the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the suffering of the Christ and the glories to come.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, and here Mike is really prophesying about what is going to be coming, but he's going to have a limited understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. They don't see the full picture yet. Nobody sees the full picture till it's pretty much already happened. I mean, we'll talk about a moment like that later on in chapter 7 here, but it's interesting how they don't understand what all God's doing. I mean, guys, Peter and them walk with Jesus for 3 years and don't see it. I mean, they're closer up on this than Micah is, and they don't even see it coming. It's not till after Christ dies, resurrects, and you get to Acts chapter 2, and all of a sudden, oh, it clicks. These guys have no idea how great this is going to be, but yet they know God can do it. And I think in some ways they expect it to be greater than they understand. I can't imagine trying to describe some of the things they're trying to describe at times, but yet they swing. They are working as hard as they can with what they have and who they know God is. So, any other thoughts? Well, if not, we are in a pretty good section here because we're going to be looking towards a restoration starting in verse 8 here. We're going to kind of get an interesting discussion, I think, here. So can somebody read verses 8 through 10? Micah 7, 8 through 10. So I think here we start to bring the whole nation into view, right? Micah bringing the whole nation in, it seems. Looking forward to a day where it's not destruction and judgment and desolation anymore, but rather restoration. A day when the people of God will be brought up out of the dirt. And we first see that the nations, the ones who have beat down on God's people, are told no longer to rejoice. Because we got to remember, God's not just the God of Israel. He's not just the God of Judah. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. He creates all of it. It's all under his rule, his reign. He uses nations, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, you name it. They're tools. They are used to bring about his will, but does not mean the tool too cannot be judged. It's coming for them too, because they're just as accountable for their actions. He can use other nations to judge them. And they're told not to rejoice anymore. Because God's going to vindicate, in a sense, Israel. He's going to raise them back up, right? They're going to go through their piece of it. They're going to have to endure the Lord. But he is going to raise them back up. He will bring them into light. They will see his salvation. And the question is, though, why? In this state? Well, it's an admission of sin in verse 9, right? Because I have sinned against him. Their sin's why they have fallen. The sin has brought Israel into judgment. And they're going to endure it, right? Ultimately, Judah does come back. And Israel is never just totally gone either. They're dispersed, they're the diaspora. They never come back to the land in the same way. But they're not just utterly wiped out. Christ comes, they can still come back to God. And then verse 10, with the nations in mind here, flips the whole situation, right? The enemy is going to be the one covered in shame. The enemy is going to be the one who is brought low. Because, they're the ones that said, where is the Lord your God? Where's that guy at that's supposed to protect you? Well, they'll see where he's at, because they're going to be brought down. They're the ones who are going to be stepped on, trampled, dirty, muddy, brought low. So in this restoration section, we see the people of God start low and be brought high. And those who stand opposed to the work of God seem to be high, brought low. Welcome to judgment. Welcome to what seems to be an upside-down kingdom. It's no mystery at times why Christ starts with the low, the outcast of society. He starts with the poor, the meek, the lowly, and brings them up into the kingdom. So, any thoughts on these verses? Nothing? All right. Hey. Can somebody get 11 through 13 then? So these verses just kind of develop our picture a little further. God's not just raising up the people. Well, they're building walls. It's a picture for safety, right? And it's going to be around God's people. That to a point, they expand, they grow even. And I want you to highlight something. It seems weird that, in a sense for us, he's not just talking walls as in the walls of this building we're in. He's talking city walls. Big, strong walls, right? We live here in Longview, Texas. We don't have a wall that runs around Longview like they would in the ancient world. Think more akin to the Great Walls of China, not the same picture, different countries, different, look to them, but they built walls for protection around cities, and I think that's the picture here. God is establishing a city, a people, a group, a kingdom with strong, safe walls built around him that will begin to grow. Because as we get further into the picture, verse 12, we see the enemies come join. This is actually, I think, a beautiful picture. Those who have stand opposed to Israel and Judah, and currently, in this time, at Mike is talking, it's Assyria, right? You're about to get the siege of Jerusalem in 701, where Judah seems to all but fall, all but be destroyed, and Israel is. Yet God says, the people of Assyria, they'll come to this kingdom. They'll want to be a part of this. And then even those old guys back there in Egypt, an enemy from your beginning, the oldest historic enemy of Israel, Egypt, where they fled from slavery, will come join you. It is this complete restoration and rebuilding to a point it's even greater than where they started. Because it is no longer just them, just this people brought out of Egypt, but rather it is Egypt and Assyria too. From sea to sea to mountain to mountain. And verse 13 shows, well, where this leads for anything outside of it. It's desolate. This is the salvation of all. Anybody outside of it, it's just desolation and destruction. Much like, guess what? Israel, Judah was described at the end of chapter 6. Where we left off in chapter 6 is reversed for them, but to those opposed to God, the desolation is now brought to them. But it seems they have an invitation to join all at the same time. The choice is in the nation's hands. So, I have more, but any thoughts, questions? Scarrett?
So many, as you go to the other prophets, it's like basically the same thing, particularly Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 19, starting in verse 22, he's talking to Egypt, to Judah, but he says, the Lord will strike Egypt, striking, but healing. So they will return to the Lord, and he will respond to them and will heal them. And starting in verse 23, very messianic, says, in that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. And the Assyrians will come into Egypt, and the Egyptians into Assyria, and the Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. And that day Israel will be one third, and Egypt and Assyria will each be a third. A blessing in the midst of the earth. So all nations are being brought together into a relationship, a blessed relationship. And then in Isaiah 35, verse 8 says, a highway will be there, a roadway, and it will be called the highway of holiness. The unclean will not travel on it, and it will be for him who walks that way. Fools will not wander. I may have stick the wrong verse, but anyway, he did say both of them refer to highway. So, Isaiah, I think, maybe makes it a little bit clearer even than Micah does in emphasizing that the nations will be brought together under the Lord.
And Isaiah is always, like, we've said this, I think, several times, but like Isaiah is always a good reference for Micah and Micah for Isaiah. Because they're taking place at similar times, talking about similar events, peoples, the whole time. I mean, there's quite literally happening at the same time. So, always interesting, too, how they do bring up similar pictures, even the same nations explicitly mentioned. Any other thoughts on these handful of verses? Well, if not, of course, I have more thoughts. So, this whole picture, this great city, this rebuilt city, these walls that expand in all nations being brought in. Obviously, I think there's some Jesus connection here. That was a softball if there ever was one. Let's look at Romans real quick. Romans chapter 1. I think Paul does a pretty good job of spelling it out. Right here at the start of Romans. I think he gives us a pretty good verse or two. Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. To the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Paul makes it clear, this salvation brought by Christ, this messianic figure, it was never only for Israel. God was using them to bring it forward to the whole world. And Paul, a Jew himself, acknowledges this fact in the opening of Romans. to the Jew first, also to the Greek. God always meant for this to happen. God was always trying to not just get to Israel, but get salvation to the world. And here we see pictures like in Micah, where that shows even in the Old Testament, right? The restored, renewed, refurbished, pick your word, for recreation picture of Israel always was meant to include more than just Israel. It's a kingdom whose borders are open for those willing to accept it. God was using Israel to gather the nations together, never to exclude him from his good work of salvation. So, that was kind of my concluding thought there on those verses. But any other thoughts, anything like that? If not, we are actually going to open up our last leg of Micah. We are in the last 6 verses. So, somebody pick up verses 14 through 17.
Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock of your heritage. You dwell solitarily in the woodland, in the midst of Carmel. Let them feed in Bashan, in Gilead, as in days of old. As in the days when you came out of the land of Egypt, I will show them wonders. To the nations shall see and be ashamed of all their might. They shall put their hand over their mouth, their ears shall be deaf. Did you say 16?
17.
They shall lift the dust like a serpent. They shall crawl from their holes like snakes in the earth. They shall be afraid of the Lord our God, and shall fear because
So, man, this is just good. I like this piece. So, obviously, I think this whole section here we just read through overflows obviously with Exodus imagery and Christ all over it, right? So first we see this call out to God to shepherd his people, to guide them, right? Because what's the job of a shepherd? To lead the sheep where they must go. And here we see it. God, do your job. Come lead us. In the book, all about leadership in a lot of ways. It ends on this note of God lead us. And it even ends up bringing back that idea of, Sinai, right? And the covenant and Exodus, all these things that Israel found its identity in, right? Because it says, shepherd your people with your staff, the flock that is your possession. Something that is God. And I think this is going back all the way, right at the start of Israel's history, right before we get things like the 10 Commandments. Because look with me real quick to Exodus 19. Exodus 19. This is, these chapters of Exodus that this kind of kicks off, or these chapters where God is really building covenant with his people and trying to get across to Israel who they are to be in relationship to him. And we get a very particular statement here in 19 verses 3 through 6. Moses went up to the mountain of God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. This is what you must say to the house of Jacob and explain to the Israelites. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples. Although the whole earth is mine, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. They're meant to be his possession. And here we see they cry out to him, make us your possession. The Exodus reference is even then made it very explicit back in Micah. All right. Let's get back over there. Verse 15, I will perform miracles for them as in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt. This chunk is very explicitly meant to bring Exodus pictures back into your mind. And it discusses this performing of miracles, signs, and wonders. And we'll touch on some things like that in a moment. Because obviously, what's one of the biggest things that Jesus does? Signs, wonders, miracles. But verses 16 and 17, I think, are particularly interesting as well. Because the nations will see this. They will see God shepherding his people, bringing them back out, signs and wonders. And their reaction, I think, is particularly, well, funny. It's kind of ashamed. It's kind of dumbfounded, kind of standing in awe at what's happening, very much like Egypt does, right? Because Egypt, by the end of it, Pharaoh doesn't know what to do with Israel. He just wants them gone. Because, I mean, the 10 plagues are rough on Egypt. But at the same time, by Pharaoh saying, let them go, it's an admission of your God is more powerful than we can deal with. And they just kind of let them leave. They try to chase, but God just doubles down, destroys the army. And I think this isn't something unusual for God, to say the least, with the nations. I think of two moments and pictures here with Jesus. Obviously, I think for a good shepherd picture, John 10 is always my go-to. John 10, verses 1 through 21, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. He identifies himself as the leader of his sheep. It's always a good reference for these pictures. But as far as the nations standing in awe of the power of God, I think there's one moment, and I love to talk about this moment. I don't think we talk about this moment enough. Look with me to Mark 15 for a moment. Mark, the 15th chapter. So, we are at the cross here in Mark 15. It'll be verses 37 to 39. And we're not just at the cross. The crucifixion is happening. Jesus is nailed to it. He is dying. And what do you have here? You have Jew and Gentile. Jew and Greek. Right? Because it's not the Jews who put Jesus on the cross. They just get him there. They have Rome do their dirty work for them. They get him tried under Roman law and executed. So you have Roman centurions standing there. And I think somebody finally starts to understand what's going on here. Look with me, Mark 15, verse 37. Jesus let out a loud cry and breathed his last. Then the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When the centurion, who was standing opposite him, saw the way he breathed his last, he said, truly this man was the Son of God. Somebody outside of Israel sees this act of sacrificial love. Now, am I saying he's understanding the full picture of everything that's just happened? No. But he sees this guy named Jesus. He's probably, who knows? He could have been one of the men that's been hitting Jesus for however long. He's been lashing him, placing crowns of thorns upon his head. But he sees the way this guy suffers and dies, and even would say the words, Father, forgive them, for they know what they do. And can't understand what he's seeing, only can say, truly, this man is the Son of God. It's the only way this happens. Oh, we're out of time. Well, I guess we're done. Thanks for all the great attention.